As a traumatic brain injury survivor, when it comes to looking back to share memories of what happened, I struggle because I don't really have memories to share. 8 years ago in 2016, I was driving a ute back from a client. I got hit by a truck, which resulted in a traumatic brain injury. When the most intensive support was happening for me to get my brain happening again, I wasn't really there. I am told that the original diagnosis was I probably wouldn't wake up from my coma. Then when I did wake, the doctors thought I was speaking gibberish. I am lucky my mum was there, as I wasn't speaking gibberish. I was speaking in Finnish. I had reverted back to toddler age and I needed to relearn how to walk and talk again. It's a bit weird because before the accident, I was learning about the brain and then got hit in the head. I wanted to complete studies in the neurosequential method of therapeutics and was in the process of obtaining my master's in forensic mental health at the time. Alongside my studies, 10 weeks before my accident, I had started a newspaper in my hometown, Tully. My life was heading on a really positive trajectory, and then all of a sudden, it went in the exact opposite direction. The most frustrating part of the journey was the need to create new neuro pathways for me to be able to adult again. And it's only now, 8 years later, that I have started to feel a little bit more like an adult again. So I do remember going back for memory tests when I was in the rehabilitation section of the hospital. I remember being told something to remember, and then by the end of the day, I had forgot every single test. So I didn't actually pass one of them. My memory, like my short-term memory, was really, really bad at that stage. So I could leave a room and not even remember a snippet from that conversation once I'd left the room. I was actually really excited 2 years after that, in about 2018, when I could actually start to remember conversations that had just happened and not completely lose all the information. There were a lot of people who supported my recovery journey through this time, and there were others that kind of took advantage. That is pretty much the same for all of us as we go through life, that there are people that we can trust and there are others that we can't. An important message that I want to share by doing this newscast is that if we know anyone going through the recovery process from a traumatic brain injury, make sure that they make connections with people that they can trust, who will support them and not people who will take advantage of them. It actually is really nice to talk to people who have their own personal experiences struggling with a traumatic brain injury. It's a great thing if you live in an area that has a support group. Sadly, being in Tully, those support groups kind of don't really exist. I am lucky that I did get to go to a speech pathologist who was at that stage travelling down from Cairns. I don't know what exists there now, sorry, but I was kind of blessed to have that speech pathologist there at the time. Because Tully didn't have a support group, I instead went to Facebook to find a support group. So yeah, I didn't really kind of have that one-on-one thing. I did trial a few psychologists at the time, but struggled to find any that I could connect with regarding my own kind of personal trauma from that time period. So back in the days of my recovery, there was a lot of travelling backwards and forwards from Cairns, because that's kind of where the specialists were. It's not Cairns, sorry, Townsville. So back in the early days of my recovery, there's a lot of travelling backwards and forwards from Townsville because that's where the specialist services were. There's this guy called Oliver. It's called Oliver's Journey, and it's at snaps.org.au, where he shares his story, and he says, the overarching theme was that there was very little understanding or information out there. I basically had to sort a lot of things out myself and find the right people on my own. It was and still is a lot of self-management, trying to find the right combinations of specialists to help. For me, as I recovered from my memory issues, the biggest battle for me was my confidence. And I didn't really like holding conversations at that time. Before my accident, I was very much a social butterfly, and I would have a really good memory to kind of remember different stuff. I struggled a lot with confidence and a lot with holding conversations because I would struggle to actually even remember basic words and retrieve them due to the block in my memory. So I avoided conversations for the most part of my recovery journey. I used to be the person telling jokes and chatting to people before that, and now I couldn't even remember the names of even the most basic thing. So to give you an example of this, I've actually got this here, and looking at it from behind, I'd be like, oh, come and grab that, pump thingy, and then somebody would hand it to me. But just before, I couldn't even remember hand sanitizer. If it was anybody else, I'd have said, it's hand sanitizer. But for me, it's like, the pump thing, grab the pump thing. Anyway, 'tis what it is. Instead of trying to have conversations, I've got into the habit of just hanging out and helping people do different tasks, as opposed to doing anything that really requires me to have an actual conversation. For me, the intelligence is still there. Like, I do still consider myself a person who has a good intelligence, but the problem for me has been really finding the words. It takes me a lot longer than I would like to be able to retrieve them. But however, I have actually come a really long way since this accident first happened. At least I can remember parts of conversations once I leave the room. Well, most of them actually. I'm a lot better in that respect. I can remember a lot of the conversation that just happened once I leave the room, not just snippets. Anyway, so the support a person recovering from a traumatic brain injury needs is more than what you think when you look at them. My heart actually is for people to stop judging us and our battle based on our appearance. These people have no idea of the journey that we are on, and they just want us to get over it. I actually have had that said to me by a few people that I did actually think at that stage that's a bit cold, because it really lacked that understanding of what I was going through. I've tentatively started to get back into community again with a little bit more wisdom than I had before, and I have enjoyed having conversations again. We are now 8 years past the accident, and it's only now that I feel capable of a decent conversation. I am hopeful for what the next 8 years will bring. So I'm going to speak about Oliver again from Oliver's journey from synapse.org.au, where he also shares, to others who've experienced a brain injury, my advice would be you're not alone. A lot of times I felt alone, misunderstood and helpless, but there is information and support services out there. It is a difficult thing to navigate and live with, but if you get the support and assistance leaning on those around you, things won't feel as helpless.